The Pacific has gone absolutely rogue. A super El Niño, the likes of which hasn't been seen in by 60 years, is currently brewing. The last time a monster like this reared its head, 1 million people starved in the ensuing famines, and entire nations saw their GDPs instantly wiped out. But this time around, the planet's baseline temperature is higher than before any prior outbreak. The burner hasn't even been lit yet, but the bottom of the pot is already boiling hot. Scientists are watching their worst-case scenario play out in real time. The Amazon rainforest, the very lungs of our planet, might flip script and start choking us with carbon. When the planet's lungs go rogue, where exactly are we supposed to breathe? Crisis impending. The deep-sea messenger and the climate slingshot. In March earlier, NASA's Sentinel-2 satellite captured an ominous sight, a massive pool of warm water, hundreds of kilometers wide, moving eastward just below the surface of the equatorial Pacific. On satellite imagery, it looked like a fiery red tongue, licking its way from Micronesia all the way to South America. By mid-May, sea levels along the coast of Peru had surged 2 centimeters above normal. The ocean is rising. Not because of tides, and not because of melting glaciers, but because the water itself is heating up and expanding. This phenomenon is known as a Kelvin wave, and it is the harbinger of a super El Niño. Before every historic climate disruption, this wave is always the first to show up. It came in 1999, it came in early 2000, and now, it's back. El Niño itself is nothing new. It has cyclical roots on Earth stretching back at least years, leaving its chemical fingerprints inside ancient coral fossils. It loops every 2 to 7 years, coming and going and coming. But this time, the sequence is completely broken. Usually, after a La Niña cycle ends, the Pacific takes a breather in a neutral state, pooling enough energy before pivoting to an El Niño. Yet through early into early low, the preceding La Niña was so incredibly weak it barely existed. The moment it retreated, the Pacific skipped the buffer entirely and began spiking in temperature. Meteorologists call this the climate slingshot effect. You pull violently toward the cold end, and then you snap back. The harder the slingshot is pulled, the more ferocious the release. The data alarm, bracing for a Sandu anomaly. The hard data is already on the table. The NOVA Climate Prediction Center issued a bulletin stating there isn't by 100% chance El Niño forms between May and July, and a staggering by 100% chance it persists through the winter of Erlinger Chi. The World Meteorological Organization, WMO, followed suit, placing the probability of El Niño emerging between June and August at by 100%, with a more than by 100% chance it extends into November. But it's the European data that is genuinely making experts break into a cold sweat. Models from the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, ECMWF, are spitting out a terrifying figure. By autumn earlier, ocean temperature anomalies could breach Sandu. What does a Sandu spike actually mean? The peak of the Chi Super El Niño sat around Sudu. The historic Erling EU event hovered near Sandu. This means Erlinger is on track to match the legendary chaos of Chi, the wildest year the Pacific has ever seen since humanity began keeping instrumental records. Mechanistic breakdown. From the Christ child to the ghost of Chenba by Chi. Centuries ago, fishermen off the coast of Peru noticed a bizarre pattern. Every few years around Christmas, the coastal waters would suddenly turn warm. The fish would vanish, the seabirds would flee, and nets cast into the water would come up completely empty. They didn't know the science behind it, but they gave it a name, El Niño, the Christ child, because it always descended around the holiday. What the fishermen saw was the disappearance of fish. What they couldn't see was a massive planetary climate engine shifting gears. Normally, trade winds blow constantly from east to west across the equator, pushing warm surface water from South America toward Asia. As that warm water moves west, deep, freezing water surges upward to take its place, a process called upwelling. This cold water is packed with nutrients that sustain the marine food chain. When the trade winds collapse, however, the warm water stays put, blocking the cold water from rising. The food chain shatters, the fishermen's nets go empty, and temperatures in the eastern Pacific skyrocket. When ocean anomalies cross the Wudu threshold for an extended period, El Niño officially arrives. If it crosses Wudu, it becomes a super El Niño. Fishermen mapped these rhythms out generations ago. But there is one question they couldn't answer, and frankly, one that modern science is still struggling to fully grasp. El Niño is a natural climate cycle, yes. Science can explain why it happens, but it cannot explain this. Why is the baseline starting line so absurdly high this time? The year earlier did not feature an active El Niño. Yet, even without that extra natural boost, global average temperatures still smashed records, consistently sitting above pre-industrial levels for consecutive months. That threshold is the exact danger line drawn by the Paris Agreement, and we've been trampling all over it for a solid year. The oceans are in an even more extreme state. The decade spanning Erling to Erling mark the hottest years for global oceans on record. More than by Funjujiu of the excess heat trapped by the planet has been absorbed by the sea. In Erling the heat content stored in the upper Langchan meters of the ocean broke records yet again. Over the last 2 decades, the rate of ocean warming has doubled compared to the end of the Earth's century. Consequently, this El Niño isn't starting from zero. It is standing on a foundation that is already blistering hot. When a natural cycle collides with human-induced global warming, the result isn't simple addition, it is multiplication. The last time we saw an energy release of this magnitude was in Ichenba by Chishuchi. That year, sea surface anomalies hit Badu. Torrents of heat backdraft from the ocean into the atmosphere, utterly breaking the global monsoon system. The Indian monsoon collapsed, northern China faced catastrophic droughts, and northeast Brazil saw total crop failure. What followed was a global mega-famine spanning 3 continents. A Erling retrospective study by Columbia University estimated the death toll at over 1 million people, signed by Funju of the global population at the time. Researchers noted that the sheer scale of mortality was on par with the world wars. And that was during an era before human-caused global warming. Today, signed to Funju of the population translates to over 1 million people. While modern humanity possesses agricultural technology and early warning systems far superior to those of Ichenba by Chishuchi, the planet's baseline temperature is also vastly higher. What happens next is uncharted territory. The global domino effect. No one is insulated. This time around, the dominoes are poised to fall across 3 major fronts. 1. The lungs of the Earth flip script. In 2023, the Amazon suffered its most severe drought on record. A research team from Germany's Max Planck Institute tracking the forest from 80-meter-high monitoring towers detected a panic signal, emissions of isoprene, a volatile organic compound trees release under extreme environmental stress, skyrocketed by 122%. The trees were screaming for help. A study published in AGU Advances in February 2026 revealed something even more alarming. During that 2023 drought, the Amazon flipped from being a carbon sink to a carbon source. Instead of absorbing carbon dioxide, the entire rainforest began venting it into the atmosphere, accounting for 30% of all tropical carbon emissions that year. The planet's lungs are actively breathing out poison. If 2026 brings an even harsher drought, this terrifying flip could become permanent. 2. Smashed food bowls and bottleneck supply chains. The food crisis. The India Meteorological Department predicts that the 2026 monsoon rains will drop to just 90% of the long-term average, potentially marking a 30-year low. Over half of India's farmland relies purely on rain. When the monsoon fails, staples like rice, soybeans, and cotton take a massive hit. Historically, during an El Niño, Indian rice production drops by an average of 3.4 million tons, a nearly 7% decline. India is the world's second-largest rice producer. When it sneezes, rice prices across Asia go into convulsions. The UN World Food Programme warns that the number of people facing acute food insecurity could spike back toward 318 million. The shipping choke point. You might not think a warming Pacific has anything to do with global shipping, but in 2023, El Niño slashed rainfall in Panama by 30%. Gatun Lake, which feeds the Panama Canal, dropped to historic lows. Daily ship transits through the 80-kilometer waterway plummeted from 38 down to 24. Everything from insulin to solar panels got choked at the bottleneck, racking up $500 million to $700 million in economic losses. And that was just a strong El Niño. Imagine the fallout under a super El Niño. 3. The invisible tax on your wallet and air. You might think rising sea temperatures on the equator don't affect your daily life. But there is a direct pipeline carrying that heat straight into your kitchen and your wallet. A study published in Science by 2 climate scientists from Dartmouth College meticulously analyzed the economic aftermath of every El Niño since 1960. Their findings were staggering. A garden variety El Niño inflicts roughly $3.4 trillion in global economic losses over the following 5 years. The 1997 Super El Niño bled the global economy of $5.7 trillion over a 5-year tail. Where do those abstract trillions hit home? They manifest as surging prices for your rice, flour, and cooking oil. They drive up the cost of coffee, cocoa, and sugar because almost every major tropical cash crop region sits directly in El Niño's crosshairs. You don't need to live on the Pacific Rim. If you eat every day, you are already locked inside this system. There is an even more insidious vector, the air we breathe. El Niño dramatically amplifies the risk of catastrophic wildfires in Indonesia and Australia. These fires don't just burn trees, they incinerate decades of carbon locked away in the ecosystem. Once that carbon hits the atmosphere, it accelerates global warming, fueling higher temperatures, which ignite more vicious fires, a self-reinforcing, runaway feedback loop. The air in your lungs and the water temperature of the Pacific are separated by nothing more than a monsoon system. The ultimate question. The Nova Climate Center updates its YNSO outlook every month. By the time someone watches a video or reads an article about this, the percentages might have shifted, or the event may have received its final, official confirmation. But there is a baseline set of facts that requires no waiting. Since 1950, Earth has witnessed 27 El Niño events, roughly one every 3 to 4 years. Only 4 of those scaled up to super status. And after every single super El Niño, global temperatures shattered records, the oceans retained more heat, and the recovery period dragged on longer. As one climate paper starkly put it, the economic scars can persist for 14 years, and some may never fully heal. The question has never been if El Niño will arrive. It is coming. It is the natural, heavy pulse of the planet. The real question is, when a planet with a chassis that is already boiling hot faces the hammer blow of this next cycle, is the floor beneath our feet strong enough to hold?